In the pantheon of global central bankers, India's former Reserve Bank Governor Dr. YV Reddy occupies a pride of place. In fact, economist Joseph Stiglitz once said that if Dr. Reddy had been the chairman of the Federal Reserve in 2008, instead of Alan Greenspan, the US probably would not have landed in the Lehman crisis. Well, at the moment, the world is in a kind of US-led financial tightening and therefore possibly some crisis. So I have with me Dr. Reddy to understand the global scenario. That's one reason to interview him. But the second big reason to interview him is that his autobiography, Advice and Dissent, is now been published this month in Hindi, titled Vimarsh or Paramarsh. And with that, his memoirs are now available in 5 languages. I'll read them up. Na Gnapakalu, that is my memoirs in Telugu, Bhinna Abhipraya, Differing Opinions in Kannada, Daivam Chirikunna, God Laughs, that's the translation in Malayalam, and of course the latest Vimarsh or Paramarsh means discussion and consultation, that is in Hindi. Well, Dr. Reddy, thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you very much, Lata. You've always been very kind to me. Very pleasant, always cheerful, charming. I can't say anything more than that. Good. Let's start off seriously.
Okay. No, so, the book is available in 5 languages. Now Hindi. Why Hindi now, sir? Is it because the government is pushing Hindi? The current regime is?
No, let me be frank. I don't think it was timed by me. It was timed by the Oxford University Press, which has undertaken the publication. And I got into an agreement 5 years back.
Okay.
But it took their own time thanks to COVID, Oxford, and all that sort of stuff. Therefore, I am not responsible for the delay.
For the timing.
For the timing. And therefore, I am also not taking any pro-Hindi or anti-Hindi stand. But I do believe that the mother tongue is important. Mother tongue is very important. And that's why I insisted on bringing my book out in Telugu, which is my mother tongue. And I also feel that you may think acquiring knowledge through English, but still you express wisdom, you're wise, only when you think of it in Telugu. I said this earlier also. And
so first Telugu, that's why.
Second one was Kannada. Kannada was another thing. In Kannada, what happened is that Professor Sriram, an eminent economist, now what he did was, he read the Telugu book, which he liked it, but at the same time, when the moment English was released, he said, this is better because it has a lot of technical also. We should the Kannada people be deprived of technical also. So he married the two in a way as a new product. And again, you can see the title, how it's different. Then comes third, Professor Thomas. Again, a very economics professor, very nice person, thorough gentleman. And he gave a lot more importance to family values. If you read
in the Malayalam version.
Yes, for the Malayalam version. And as you know, if you look at the book and the preface to the book written by all the translators, you will get this. That if attach more attach more importance to family values.
Yes.
And then finally you have the Hindi.
Hindi.
In Hindi also, the preface explains why it's very important. And certainly Hindi is very important for our country. Most important is large population, very large population, Hindi speaking. Second is the age profile. The age profile is a lot more people are younger. So 3, at the moment, there's a lot of interest in share markets. So the Hindi belt is becoming conscious. The whole people are, young people also are coming up for concentrating on financial, yearning for knowledge. It's not available in their own language.
Well, since you've given it in many languages, I just wanted to know, what do you want to convey, and are the translations honest to what you are conveying?
Incidentally, I must tell you some of the dilemmas I faced, perhaps, as a biography, when I write my autobiography. First thing is, how much should I disclose? How much is confidentiality? And what I should keep in mind, just to make it very dramatic or simply analytically. So this is a personal decision I have to take. And sometimes whenever I felt that public interest does not warrant disclosure, we should not warrant. We should not scandalize people unless it serves a public interest. So that's what I thought substantively. Secondly, are we catering to the reader or are we catering to myself? That's I have to feel like saying something. I want to say something. And therefore I say, then the reader is not in the picture. Otherwise, I think of what the reader may like. So that's again another choice you have to make. Well, and third, of course, is that you have got to make a choice between a dialect, as I mentioned. There are a lot of choices you have to make, a lot of ethical questions that you have to make. For instance, Arun Jaitley pointed out that when the finance minister spoke to me in 1988, he did not know that I'm going to disclose the public now. Is it moral for me to disclose the public now? These are the issues that come up.
That you have to tackle. I agree with you. So, but, for me, in your advice and dissent, the chapters 11 to 15, where you tackle the 1991 crisis, is the most interesting. The reforms still have a magical quality. Today, since then, do you think we have done anything as dramatic or as paradigm changing as 91?
Let me start disagreeing with your first statement. Okay. 1991 magically is not correct appreciation. Okay. The correct appreciation is 1991 is a decontrol era. Okay. It's not a reform, it's decontrol. Okay. We had a tight control, license control, right? We relaxed the controls. We did not change the law instantly. Most of the law was not changed. So it is deregulation. Okay. So they used to say, I will not exercise this power. Okay. There are a lot of powers that they are exercising before. Under the deregulated regime, they started saying, I don't want to exercise this. Not exercise. So the regulations, they are dilatory. Whereas after 91, actually during the period of Vajpayee and Yashwant Sinha and Jaswant Singh, real reform took place in terms of institutional change, law, fiscal responsibility legislation, FEMA, all these things have been brought about by this. So in my view, and it's not only my view, Shankaracharya, former chief economic advisor, has written a book on this, where he explains how Yashwant Sinha was the leader of the reform in India. So first, I want to say 1991 is not dramatic, important, politically very important to lose the control. That has been done. That's P. Sarkar and Manmohan Singh can take credit. But reform is really Manmohan Singh, not Manmohan Singh, but it's Vajpayee. And Yashwant Sinha and Jaswant Singh.
Okay, sir. Well, but 1991 still is a paradigm shift in our memory. Let me bring you to the present, because I think that's what the world wants to hear from you. Like Stiglitz said, the 2008 crisis was because there was loose monetary policy. Now, the US is tightening very dramatically. About 500 basis points of rate hikes in 1 year is unheard of. What do you think may be the repercussions? Do you think it will be recession? And what may be the repercussions for a country like India?
See, we have to view the perspective. See, 1991 reform was of India because the problems in India versus the rest of the world. Not a global, though technically we ascribe it to this oil crisis. It's not a global in that sense. It's not our reform. Our headache, basically. When it came to 2008, it's not really us in sense, but it's a crisis of financial sector and North Atlantic, basically, not us. So even that is not that big a challenge. But this time it's a very big challenge. Very big challenge because the whole global system is changing. And in fact, the balances between the state and market are changing. The balances between state and market, the public and private enterprise, between national and global, these things are shaking. And the geopolitical situation has tremendously changed. So this sort of a change which is definitely disruptive, but definitely not going to end up easily in any particular solution. Okay. So a huge uncertainty that we're living through. And therefore, I think being nimble-footed is good for our policy. See, better to be cautious than over-optimistic. Don't be adventurous. And we should be careful about telling people that this is a real problem. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to create false impressions. But we should, and people are now quite intelligent, they can understand our position. I think we should really give a balanced view of the challenges. The balanced view is be careful.
Okay. But, we often say that we were the fastest growing economy in 2022 and that even after the slowdown to maybe 6%, we will be the fastest growing economy. There is a bit of self-praise when we describe the Indian economy. You think that is dangerous? Is it well-founded? What are the red flags?
Let me put it this way. It is all by and large truthful. Nobody can say it's not correct. But you have to also make a distinction. India and its people. India and its people. What's the wealth of India? What's the income of people? Oh. So if we recognize people matter for India, not just India by itself, then you have to view it together. And you have to say that this is what India stands for. These are the people. So if you say India GDP growing very fast, then you should say, what the per capita income, Bangladesh is growing faster. Okay. So like this, we should keep constantly, at least the readers, and everybody else should keep constantly in mind that things may have to be, you may have to see little more than you read the newspapers, that we put it that way. And therefore, I think things are, certainly I think short term is very bright. Certainly short term is very bad. Because again, we are taking advantage of two situations. One is we are not very well integrated in the globe. And the globe
which will work to our advantage.
Right. So therefore, that's one. And secondly, we were ourselves not very much into any ideological position, either politically or economically. We were just somewhere in the middle, left, right, left, right. So in that ambiguous position of non-commitment to any particular ideology, any particular, we're taking advantage. And I must compliment the Prime Minister for taking advantage of this particular neutral position. The uncommitted country is giving him a lot of dividends now.
Oh, yes. Even geopolitically.
Yeah, geopolitically. That's what I mean. So that's why I would say that I think people have to be perhaps far more careful than what they are now about the Indian economy and its prospects. Okay. And the society also, if I put it that.
But we do have twin deficits. So now a budget will come up in less than a month. Do you think fiscal deficit should be a worry? We ran up a deficit because of COVID. Should that be a very important consideration, considering that this year we will end with a near 3% current account deficit also?
First, let me start with the current account deficit. See, current account deficit definitely influences the medium-term view. Because it's not a current account deficit which determines the exchange market. The exchange market are determined by capital account. Capital account transactions. So short-term fluctuations are entirely due to. So current account deficit may not be built into day-to-day movements. Current account deficit will be built into structural. Yes. And also the effectiveness of current account deficit in transmission to the exchange is highly diluted because less for us, supply chain, etc. That's one. And therefore, what we have a situation is that current account should be a worry when people assess our fundamentals, but not for market volatility. For that, I have to look at capital flows. In the capital flows also, we have slight problems also in capital flows because our reserves have been built out of borrowings basically, and more important, the debt portion and particularly government portion has been increasing a little large now. Okay. So the composition of capital flows requires a careful watch before we attract anymore. But at the moment, we are not in danger as far as the current account is concerned. I think I should say that as Rangarajan pointed out in his book, the external sector has been put a firm footing. And virtually we have no, external sector is no longer a constraint for our policy the last 30 years. We can be very proud. Rangarajan can be very proud. And then you come to the issue
fiscal
of
deficit.
Fiscal deficit, normally, if the current account deficit is not an immediate problem, fiscal deficit also is not an immediate problem. Again, not because we are great, but simply because most of it is funded and domestic bias by the savers, and also institutional exploitation, institutional prescriptions. And then finally, household savings are pretty high. Household financial savings are pretty high. This is a redeeming feature, which always existed, which will continue to exist. But there is a problem still. The problem is that if we stretch it too far, then it could break down. So we have to be very careful in not stretching it too far. So I won't say, I would not worry about fiscal deficit, but I would certainly worry, particularly central government. Because people look at central government basically. The macro analysts may prepare, but markets don't look at totality of the deficit, subnational deficit, plus. No, they are considerable government of India, direct and indirect.
No, at the moment it is 6.4% for the current year. And the government has stated its intent to bring it down to 4.5% by 26. That is 200 basis points in 3 years. You think it should be front-loaded, that at least 60-70 basis points of reduction is necessary in FY24? You know, sub 6%, bring it to 5.7 or 5.8?
Can you believe it? If you see history, track record of the government of India, I would be hesitant to believe it till it is proven.
Okay. But that should be the goal, would you say?
Absolutely, there's no doubt. Stating the goal is okay, but you should not believe yourself that the goal is reachable quickly. See, there are two things. One is what you believe in. Second is what you're telling others to convince.
Okay.
This is not necessarily the same.
No, but should they aim for something under 6?
Could be. That could be a question mark. Are you fooling the people too often, too much? If you fool the people too often, too much, markets also will smell it. There is a danger, but I think so far some balance, not so much balance, less than perfect balance, but I think something the government of India is delivering in terms of transparency.
Yes.
But not as much as it's claimed, of course, certainly not as much as it's claimed. But I would say principle-wise, direction-wise, they are right. The movement is very, very, very slow.
That is true. Okay, so I have to take a break. But I want to speak about the banking sector to you. In a minute, after this break, reforms in the banking sector. Welcome back to this special chat with Dr. YV Reddy, former Governor, Reserve Bank of India. The OUP, Oxford University Press, has just published the Hindi translation of his autobiography, Advice and Dissent. The Hindi book is called Vimarsh or Paramarsh. Okay, we've spoken about the book, Dr. Reddy. I want to speak about the banking sector. Of course, in your autobiography, you discuss at length about the start of the reissue of private sector bank licenses and the failures or the disadvantages of, nationalizing of the banks. Okay, now I wanted to ask you about a point which the former Chief Economic Advisor, KV Subramaniam, raises. He points out in his recent book that all countries which have had rapid growth of per capita income, like Korea, Malaysia, have higher bank credit to GDP. Their bank credit to GDP is 150%. Ours is only 65%. So do you think that this is a big drawback and that we need to push more bank credit? And in the first place, why is it that our bank credit to GDP is so low?
Thank you very much. In fact, I am very hesitant to disagree with Dr. Subramaniam because he is a specialist in the banking sector.
Okay.
But still I can say, from a macroeconomic sense, the wisdom in the world is not settled whether the financial sector leads, that the bank credit to GDP leads or it follows. Okay. The question is whether the growth is because of the credit or the credit is because of the growth.
Okay.
So is that
you would rather that growth be first and lead?
Not exactly, but don't think that financial sector can lead the real sector.
Right.
In the ultimate analysis, it's the real sector which determines the growth of the financial sector. Short term,
but why are we so behind others?
That's very simple. That's very simple. Public sector banks. Not so. I won't say for
nationalization.
First, for countries of comparable development.
Okay.
You expect a distinction of capacity of the bankers and the capacity of the banking system. See, capacity of the Indians may be great because they're in financial sector everywhere. But that doesn't mean that our financial system. So in terms of correlation of the level of development and banking, I'm not so sure. But certainly I don't think we should think that by encouraging financial sector, by encouraging banking, you will grow. Simplistic assumption. And this is something which happened even when in the run-up to 2008.
Yes.
I had to address this issue. The point is that we know that the debt to GDP has to raise in order to maintain the growth. But when it has to raise, what should be the... and again, whenever there's a crisis, you remember, you say that there's a problem with cyclical.
Yes.
How do you accommodate counter-cyclical policy? It's a unidirectional increase in debt to GDP ratio. And therefore, what we do is what I told the gatherings in Switzerland and all that when I discussed. I said, look, my problem is I know that the debt to GDP ratio has to increase. But how should it increase? In some sectors it should increase. In other sectors it may be speculation entirely. You see that during
and for us it also led to the NPA cycle.
And during my time, I put maximum restrictions on the real estate.
Yes.
Is that the correct thing to do or not is the question. Similarly, sectors, you have to differentiate sectors and impact. And most important, it's not the monetary policy that influences the banking system. In the reaction between growth and policies, macro policies, I think the growth and cyclicality can be addressed not by aggregate monetary policy, but from financial sector regulation. We have to make central banks perform two types of functions. So therefore, we have to be very clear. Monetary policy can handle aggregate. And whereas the
banking
regulation can be used to some extent in allocation of credit.
That is what he says. Allocation of credit is one thing. His point is that we have a capital adequacy ratio of 9, whereas the Basel norm, the BIS norms are 8%. Rest of the world has 8% capital adequacy. So his argument is we should bring it down so that banks can lend more. But there is the other side which says that because we are doing well now in the banking system and NPAs are low, we should actually impose counter-cyclical buffers.
You see, let me put it this way. Maybe he is a little too confident of our banking sector as a whole, or our governance. Let me put it very clearly. The loan recovery, so far it has shown, even recently also, the loan recovery is a result of governance. How the governance is maintained, how the law is enforced. on both governance standards and enforcement, we are very weak. As long as we are very weak, don't follow global things in this matter. We have to create our Indian buffer. We have to create Indian buffer for this. So as any particularly regulators of banking system, we'll have to say that, look, be careful, be careful.
Okay.
So don't say 8, global standard. You don't have global standard, of course, you don't have global standard.
Okay. We should have global standards of governance also. Sir, the other issue that is now gaining currency, or it's a very common theme, is climate financing. Now, we have Jerome Powell saying that he is not going to change, orchestrate central bank monetary policy on climate considerations at all. He has clearly said that he has got only one mandate, and that would be inflation and growth, not climate. But India has a discussion paper on climate financing. The Bank of England has has imposed climate conditions on itself. So what do you think? Do you think monetary policy should be guided by climate financing? What's your stand?
Let me put it this way. See, climate financing relates to a particular aspect. There's a big problem, a very big problem. And at the outset, let me say that very serious problems for the economy and the society as a whole, that all policies have to work together. To that extent, monetary policy also should work together in terms of climate. But the question is whether the central bank has the capacity, expertise, instruments to do that. We have to be very careful in thinking that we have capacity. I think structurally, monetary policy is not well equipped. May not know what's the climate fund, I say. So what's the point? Giving money is not a development sector.
So you're agreeing with Powell that climate should not be an input into monetary policy making?
No, definitely climate need not be a formal input. But you may not be able to ignore the developments related to climate by other regulators. You have to keep it in mind so that you don't do anything counter that. It's one thing to say that I take into account climate fund. The other thing is to say I give some appropriate ways as the circumstances warrant. That's the nuance, because from a public point of view, it should not appear that the central bank is away and apart from the societal concern.
Okay.
If the major societal concern is the climate, central bank says, okay, I am also willing to do that. But maybe US being, you see, very often when the central bankers talk, my problem is the central bankers talk sometimes to the common man, sometimes to the financial market, sometimes to the intermediaries, so you have to be careful.
Okay. So you would say that when you're making monetary policy, you concentrate on inflation and growth, but as a banking regulator, as a central banker for the economy, you must encourage climate financing.
Not encourage, but basically you should not appear to be not even taking into account a matter of such. It's like crisis. Okay. In a crisis, all policies merge. Okay. Now, when the society recognizes it, all of us should merge. So I would also be add if the, I can hear, like Powell, I can turn it back and say, please tell me what I can do.
Okay.
Then the answer will come from the people.
Okay. Well, finally, Dr. Reddy, I wanted to ask you about what is your view of India's medium term. A lot of brokerages think that this is our decade, and we should be able to easily produce 6 to 7 or even 7% growth throughout this decade. Do you think that our time has come and this is going to be our decade?
I think Professor Manmohan Singh had tried it once before, if you don't remember. If you recall, when the reform started, Professor Manmohan Singh, this is our time.
Our time has come.
Nobody can.
India's time has come.
So that happened once through Manmohan Singh. It may happen again, this time also. So don't be surprised. It's the same as Manmohan Singh rhetoric. Okay. There is a rhetoric, we have to accept the rhetoric. Maybe sometimes it inspires people, but otherwise it's very difficult to say our time has come. When you are ranked in terms of poverty of the people, about 130, you're among the 10% of the poorest countries in the world. You can't say India is great, but people are not great.
Oh, okay.
You would later concede that. So we have to also be conscious that when we project that I go out to the country, if they say, I say India is great, but I got problems, people are there, large number of poor people, I have to serve them. That is the proper thing to say. Than say Kautilya or something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, to bringing some reality into our vision of ourselves.
Thank you.
Yes, we have a bright future, but we should remember that we have big problems.